Senator, thank you so much for being
pleasure.
with us. Let's talk cannabis. How did you get involved in this industry after being the Senate Majority Leader? What brought you into cannabis industry?
Well, I've spent a lot of my public life working on healthcare issues, and I've learned in recent years just what an enormous opportunity cannabis may present if we provide the kind of research and the kind of meaningful commitment to understanding the opportunities that cannabis provides. So it's really the desire to improve health and provide greater access to better health that led me to be as interested as I am now.
You know, former congressional leader John Boehner is also involved in the industry. Is there something to that? Is this kind of the new revolving door?
I don't know that it's a revolving door as much as an indication of how bipartisan this whole effort is. John Boehner was a Republican Speaker of the House, and I was a Democratic Majority Leader of the Senate. And I think it's an indication of the kind of meaningful bipartisan interest there is in looking at ways with which cannabis can play a bigger role, especially in healthcare.
So you're focused on the healthcare component, but you're not supportive of a federal legalization. Why not?
What I am supportive of is taking cannabis out of what is called Schedule I, which is the most restrictive controlled substance in the country. It prevents us from providing research and from really putting the kind of effort into understanding what cannabis can do in a healthcare realm. Obviously, the more we know, the more likely we'll be to provide answers to other things that we can do. But I think it's important to start where it's most critical, and that's healthcare.
But does it have to be legal federally to be able to use it for healthcare purposes the way that you would like to see it?
I think it has to be regulated. There's no question that regulation is going to continue to be necessary, as it is with all drugs in health, not only drugs but other medications. I think it's important for us to create that infrastructure to give people confidence and to give everyone a better understanding of what we can and cannot do. That means taking Schedule I down to maybe Schedule V or some other means by which we can ensure some degree of certainty with regard to the regulatory infrastructure that we'll be working under.
And, you know, there also is a lot of talk of criminal justice reform related to the legalization of cannabis and of marijuana. Do you see that intertwined with the work that you're doing? And what would you like to see done?
That's a great question, and the answer is emphatically yes. I think it's really important for us to continue to look at criminal justice reform and just the almost audacious way with which we've treated this issue in the past 30 or 40 years. We've got to come to a better reality about how to address this challenge going forward, and I think on a bipartisan basis, once again, we're beginning to see it.
Are you seeing anything in the Trump administration that is helpful to your cause? Anything that they're doing that you agree with when it relates to this issue?
Not so far, but I'm hopeful. Obviously, this is an early stage, and there's a lot we can do together. I think the more we can keep this a bipartisan issue, the more likely it is we're going to be successful. And so while I haven't seen anything immediate, I do hope and expect that at some point we're going to be able to reach some real consensus about especially taking Schedule I out of the picture.
I also want to ask you about some news of the day items. Trade and China, really big issues this week, especially with the president's actions. You're from South Dakota. What are you hearing from people back home about this issue, how it's affecting farmers or, you know, your former constituents? What are they telling you? What are you hearing? What are the real effects of this on the ground there?
Well, the real effects in South Dakota couldn't be much more devastating. It's really been an extraordinary, painful experience for our farmers and ranchers. The agricultural complexity, the agricultural ramifications are just profound. We haven't seen anything like this in decades. And so there's a real recession in American agriculture today, in large measure because of the new circumstances we're facing in trade. It has to change soon. Farmers need relief, and the paltry relief they're getting from the federal government right now isn't going to cut it.
Are you seeing any evidence that supporters of the president might think twice in 2020 about supporting him again? You know, some Republicans have said that while this going on right now may affect them in the short term, it's better for trade in the long term. Is that something that you're hearing?
Well, I think there is a recognition that China deserves much more aggressive treatment with regard to its unfair trading practices, and President Trump has certainly been aggressive. I do think, though, there has to be a way to negotiate these matters much more successfully than we've done to date. There is an impact. We have to realize what a consequence this is having, not only on agriculture, but in so many other sectors of the economy as well. So it's a difficult, it's a challenging time, and one that I hope can be corrected sometime soon.
In 2008, in the 2008 campaign, you were a very early supporter of then Senator Barack Obama. This time around, though, you are supporting Joe Biden. It's such a diverse field and a lot of new, fresher faces on the scene. Why support Biden?
Well, I support Joe Biden in part because I know him so well and I've worked with him for so long. I have so much respect for his ability, his experience, and I think at this point, as we've seen for the last several years, coming to Washington and working in a position of authority like the presidency without any experience at all causes me to wonder whether we want to continue that practice. Joe Biden brings enormous experience to the table, enormous wherewithal with regard to the many challenges we're facing both domestically and in foreign policy. So it seems to me that the key word this time is going to be experience, and Joe Biden has it.
So when you did support Obama, he was criticized for not having the traditional kind of experience to be president. What has kind of changed your mind then? Is it the Trump administration that's kind of put this into this view?
Well, generally, my view is that experience matters a great deal. In Barack Obama's case, it was his judgment that really impressed me. He had enormously effective, good judgment. And then he also had just the sense that you needed to bring smart and good people around you, and he did. He brought Joe Biden in as his vice president, and Hillary Clinton as the Secretary of State, and so he had wise and experienced people around him. I haven't seen enough of that. There are some in the administration that I give credit to for the work that they're doing and the commitment they've made to their country and their jobs, but I don't see enough of that in the Trump administration, frankly.
There are several candidates who are talking about some big and bold ideas that they want to get passed through either Congress or by executive order if they're elected, some of these 2020 candidates. And something we've been hearing is support for eliminating the filibuster. And I know that kind of sounds like an arcane, kind of in the weeds rule, but it would be pretty revolutionary in the Senate. You're a former majority leader of the party in the Senate. Would you support that kind of thing? What does it mean to you that they're having this conversation at this point?
I can understand those who haven't been here very long and those who are frustrated by the tremendous dysfunction that exists today, why they would call for the elimination of the filibuster. But the filibuster in so many ways is really one of the key elements to the character of the Senate. What it does is require bipartisanship. It requires people to compromise and to find middle ground. What we should do is to go back to the way the Senate used to function with regard to the filibuster, and that is you got to keep people in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't dual track. You can't set the bill aside and take up something else. Stay on the bill. That's the way we used to do it, and so you had very few filibusters because they were painful. Now they're painless, and because they're painless, there are many, many more of them.
Another big issue this week that's being talked about in the Democratic primary and across the country, this issue of abortion rights. Democrats have not really rallied around the idea of nominating Supreme Court justices or federal judgeships across the country the way that Republicans have. Do you see the tide turning? Are the courts going to be kind of a galvanizing force for Democrats the way they are for Republicans in 2020?
I don't think there's any question the courts will remain a galvanizing force on both sides. Democrats generally don't believe in litmus tests. They don't believe that there is one critical issue that requires either for or against a certain nominee. But I do think that women's health and women's rights and women's freedom is increasingly going to be a rallying factor and a very important question that candidates are going to be asked about, and I think that's as it should be.
There's also been a lot of support among the base of the party for big ticket items like the Green New Deal and some other things. Are you concerned at all about the party moving too far to the left or being perceived as moving too far to the left ahead of this election?
I think there is some concern about that, but I do think that all these ideas are refreshing and energizing and exciting and deserve to be considered. I don't have to agree with any one of them to understand their value. It's generating debate, it's generating energy, and it's bringing in new people into the political process who are energized as well by those issues. So it's a good thing to have all these issues. We can decide later what the consensus is and what we ought to do as a party or as a leader, but I think right now having this wealth of ideas is really one of the healthiest things any party could ask for.
And since you're from a red state, Democrats have talked a lot after 2016 about trying to win back voters that they lost in 2016. How can they do that? How can they reach out to those voters and get them to change their minds again?
Well, I think it's really important for us to empathize and to give them the attention they deserve. I don't think in the past we've given them the attention oftentimes that they really deserve and expect. If you're not given attention, if your concerns and your issues and your challenges in life are not being addressed, you're not going to be that interested in supporting a particular candidate. We rhetorically and substantively have to address the concerns more effectively, and I think we're going to begin to do that.
And your final advice to Joe Biden, since you're endorsing him?
Just hang in there. It seems like he's doing just about everything right at this point, and be a consensus builder. Continue to talk about the importance of good governance in your experience, and you're going to do just fine.
Senator Tom Daschle, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.